All right, everybody, welcome to the Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. On today's episode, we will look at the current favorites to win the Stanley Cup now that the Colorado Avalanche and Boston Bruins and Tampa Bay Lightning are out of it. And which matchup does the NHL want to see most in that Stanley Cup final? New episode of Locked On NHL and the Denker Dogs right now.
Or Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. From Locked On Avalanche, I am Chris Maselli from Locked On Lightning. He is Mr. Adam Denker. Thank you for tuning in, making it your first listen of the day. That is always appreciated. Yeah, man. So we will be getting into the current state of the series that are currently being played for round 2. We'll dive into that because it's playoff time. It's kind of what you do during playoff time. And we're going to start, however, with what we feel like the NHL wants to see. They'll come out and they'll say all the right things and, you know, just we want the best team to win. We just want a good series. Deep down, every league wants the series that will obviously bring the most eyes to the final. And I guess while we're talking about this, why don't we just bring up, I'll just have this up on, if you're watching on YouTube, the odds. This is from FanDuel, the current odds. We'll get to those in a minute, maybe in the next segment, but we'll just leave those up there for now and kind of discuss what we think the league wants as their final. So if I were to ask you that question with the teams remaining, not at the beginning of the season or even at the beginning of the playoffs, with what's left, and I don't mean that like that sounded very ugly and nasty, like with
a little passive aggressive considering who our teams are.
I did not mean it like that at all. But what the teams that are remaining, who does the league want to see in the final to bring in the most viewership?
Well, I think really, Chris, it depends on what audience the NHL has in mind. Are they looking at the diehards or are they looking at the new fans that you get in during the playoffs every year? I think
that's a good question.
And it goes to towards what I was talking to you before we hit the record button. Personally, the hockey fanatic in me would like to see Edmonton and Toronto, McDavid versus Matthews, both teams who have not really been successful in recent years because of, and I don't know if this will be a storyline, I'm sure they'll bring it up at one point, but have not been successful because of not so good goaltending. So right. that's a cool little fun parallel there. You know, who's going to make the first big stop in that series would be probably
right.
the big tagline, I guess. I guess also the other matchup though that I think that the league would want would be a cool storyline because you know you want to grow the game of hockey in North America, especially in the United States more. And this is also kind of a personal kind of wish. I would also like to see Florida versus whomever from Vegas and Seattle. You know, whoever wins that gets their first Stanley Cup win. So that's kind of a cool storyline there as well.
What do you? I mean, that was a good question that you asked to kind of lead into what you were talking about of what does the league want? And you said, you know, the diehards or those, you know, maybe casual fans, and I would say leaning towards that. Because the diehards are going to watch no matter what.
Yeah.
Like you have that number baked in. You want to be able to sell something to those, you know, people that don't tune in every day. And what is the best matchup to? What can you promote the best? And you see at our odds here, you know, you have Toronto and Edmonton. Forget about that for right now. We'll talk about that later. But would that be because, like you said, you need to grow the game in the United States? You don't really need to grow it in Canada. You know, that's always going to be the top dog up in Canada. So would a Toronto Edmonton final, that would be a fantastic matchup
Yeah.
Would it be one that you can push in the United States with having two Canadian teams? Would the United States tune into that? I absolutely would. You absolutely would. That would be a very interesting final because you have many of the best players in the league. You can promote that. But do you think there would definitely be Americans who are like, two Canadian teams, I don't really care.
I think it goes down to how they market the game. I think if they do it Maple Leafs, Oilers, and you show all these flashy highlights of all the players on the team, no one's going to care. But if
Yeah, I
you
agree
do
with
it,
that. Yep.
if you do it like how the NBA back in the day when LeBron was in Cleveland and he was going to the final every year against Golden State, they did it Steph versus LeBron. If they do it like McDavid versus Matthews, and the McDavid highlights speak for themselves. And
Sure.
if you show, some of Matthews highlights as well, I think that does have the potential to bring in the new viewership but they also have to make that parallel in a way. And I think that also goes back to ESPN and their agreement. I think they're going to probably rely heavily on ESPN to really go crazy with the marketing. And if all I'm saying is if ESPN uses the LeBron Steph comparison in any commercial that is linked to Edmonton, Toronto, and McDavid Matthews, I fully expect some sort of check coming in the mail towards my way because I just threw that up there. But I'm curious, Chris, we're talking about what the league wants. Now, let me ask you a question. Is Carolina, Dallas in the final, and no disrespect to those teams, because I really do like Dallas. Is Carolina, Dallas in the final considered an absolute nightmare in terms of marketing for the league?
Yeah, it's tougher. I'll say that. Yeah, I think it's tougher because I was going to go back to, follow up on the Canadian point because I kind of feel like with hockey, it people know across the globe that it's huge in Canada.
Yeah.
So because of that, if it were to be a Toronto Edmonton final, I think you'd get great ratings because people understand the importance of hockey to Canada.
Yeah.
And I think people from the United States will absolutely tune into that because it's kind of baked in. It's like, yeah, like sure, there's no other sport where you associate Canada with that sport other than hockey, right? And yeah, we have a basketball team or one basketball team that plays in Toronto, and you have the same thing with baseball, but it's not at the level of hockey. So I don't think it'll be a problem as far as ratings go. I think that could be your best matchup for ratings. And I think the Canadian thing doesn't even matter in the long run. I think that will in the United States, I should say. I think people understand how big it is in the sport and they will be tuning in. And then you have all the people who are playing for those two teams, like you said, like the Matthews, McDavid, Draisaitl, all those guys, and people will tune in for that. For yeah, I mean, throwing out like a Carolina and Dallas one, that would be a fun fight, but that's a tougher sell. So it's so odd how I'm asking the question, like, would people in the United States watch a Toronto Edmonton final? They'd probably watch more than if it was a Carolina Dallas one or even a Carolina, who else? Seattle one. You know what I mean? Like that might be a tougher push because what are you selling there individually? And that's where sports is right now.
Yeah.
Sports is like, yeah, you can sell the team, that's baked in, but who's playing on those teams? Who's on the screen when you're saying these two teams are playing? And for Carolina, Dallas, they have good players on that team, but are a lot of them household names like you would have with Toronto and Edmonton for the average hockey fan?
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah, you can't really market Jamie Benn versus Sebastian Aho, I think. Or Joe Pavelski versus versus Martin Nicias.
Yeah,
can't really throw that on a
player.
I know that's the crazy thing because I think we're talking about like the hardcore fans. I think that would honestly, other than Toronto Edmonton, I think Carolina Dallas would be great in terms of for diehard hockey fans.
For diehard, yeah,
For the
I like that.
diehards.
I would agree with that, yeah, because that they would like that's think about that series. Like who, man, if you had to predict that series, is that like a guaranteed 7-game series? It might be if it were those two. That would be a great series. So I don't know. Interesting to talk about, but we're going to talk about these specific numbers that you see on your screen. If you're watching on YouTube, we have the odds from FanDuel for the favorites that are the teams that are remaining. And we're going to talk about those in a minute, as well as where the series stand and how we think they're going to play out. But first, we're going to hear from Built Bar. And if you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and calories, and you need to get the best tasting protein bar ever, and those are Built Bars. You got to try them. And what makes them so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real dark chocolate, and they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. And I went and checked. I don't know if you know this, Danker, but they have a limited edition right now. And if you're listening to this, you might want to go to built.com because they have a special flavor now. It's animal cookie. Yeah, man. Like the frosted animal cookie too. Don't. You're in stunned silence. I can tell. So you can also head to your nearest Walmart or Sam's Club if you don't want to order online, which obviously you still can do. But if you need them right now and you're just impatient, go to Walmart or Sam's Club, walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or the coconut puff. And if you're in Sam's Club, you can grab a 13-bar box of the flavors brownie batter puff and churro puff. Get in on the Built Bar craze, and you can thank us later. All right, so let's dive into. We'll talk about these odds right now, is where they stand with FanDuel, and then I'll probably just lead into kind of discussing these series as they are. So the favorites right now, when it comes to winning the Stanley Cup from FanDuel, is Toronto. Toronto is the favorite, followed by Edmonton, and then New Jersey, Carolina, Dallas, Vegas, Florida, and then Seattle is distant at the bottom. You agreeing with these? Are you not agreeing with these? You have 3 of the top 4 teams are from the East. So FanDuel really feels like whoever comes out of the East, with the exception of Florida, probably will win this thing.
I mean, listen, I haven't watched every single team that's up here, but I say is Toronto deservingly is in first place. I mean, they played a hell of a series against the Lightning, and it finally looks like that they've gotten that monkey off their back. I mean, it depends on how you feel about, whether or not they've exercised their demons just by winning one round, or they need to go further in order for there to be some sort of credibility with this team. But the team that I am honestly looking down at the bottom, I'm shocked that Seattle is so low at just plus 1,800. I would have thought, just the way I've been seeing them play over the last couple of weeks. I mean, they on the ice, just from the ice test, they look just as good as a New Jersey, just as good as a Carolina. And, if you're looking to maybe, maximize your money, obviously, if you want to, and not have to go crazy with it. I mean, Seattle's a very good pick. I'm very shocked. I wouldn't be surprised if in the upcoming weeks, or, if they continue to win games and progress throughout the playoffs, we start to see their odds get a little bit closer to Jersey or maybe even Carolina.
Really? You think? Yeah. I mean,
I just think that they're a better all-around team. I mean, I don't think they're as good as Toronto, but as we all know in the playoffs, that doesn't really mean anything. We said the same thing about Florida and Boston, and look how that worked out.
Yeah.
Seattle's one of those teams is, if you don't put them away early and they stick around, they'll hurt you.
Yeah, you let them hang around. Any team will hurt you. And then the big thing that we've said all year long with Seattle is their goaltending. And I mean, if Grubauer can just replicate what he did in the first round against the Avs, you always have a shot, right? And that first game against Dallas was a back and forth affair. I think they ripped off 2 goals in 11 or 12 seconds. Like, is that something that they're capable of doing? Yeah, it is. Like they don't jump off the screen of having like this incredible offensive like powerhouse of a team, but 5-on-5, they were the best in the league at 5-on-5.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, like stay out of the penalty box and you got a shot. So, but to win the Stanley Cup, I think is going to be a tall order for them. That no matter who you're going up against in the final with these 4 teams that are remaining from the East, maybe, and I say with the exception of Florida, but you can't discount a team that just went out and beat the Bruins either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, I mean,
and they beat the Leafs the other night too.
Yeah. I mean, you could honestly look at this and make a case for any one of these teams, including the 2 on the bottom in Florida and Seattle. It's great. And that's the beauty of hockey is you can always do that. And I don't think it's too far-fetched to say something like Seattle has a chance. Maybe I should say, maybe it's far-fetched to say that they can win the Stanley Cup. But to get there, I think that's within reason. Definitely.
Yeah.
So.
And let me ask you, Chris, real quick about Carolina, because they're an interesting case that, according to this, Jersey has a slightly better odds than Carolina to win the cup. Now, do you think maybe the bookmakers are looking at that because they are comparing who they beat to each other? Now, obviously on paper and for the better part of this year, the Rangers have been significantly better than the Islanders. Now, do you think that's the reason why? And I, no shade towards the Devils, but I feel like that was more so the Rangers just kind of like not showing up in that series, whereas Carolina went out there and played very well against the Islanders. So
yeah,
what is your feelings on that?
It's a good question. I don't know. It might be who they beat in the first round. I mean, if you have a team that went the distance and came out on top, and if you look at these numbers, like Jersey is just over Carolina, so it's not like Jersey is number 3 at plus 500. Carolina's at 4 at plus 550. So that's as tight as it gets. The only one tighter is you have Dallas and Vegas tied at plus 650. But I mean, if you're asking me who would I switch any of these, that's probably the one that I would switch. I'd probably put Carolina at 3 and New Jersey at 4. And I just feel like Carolina is a little bit more battle tested than New Jersey. I always feel, and sometimes this comes back to bite me, but I always feel like the teams that don't have a lot of experience in the playoffs, at some point it catches up to them. But the longer those teams go, the longer they feel like, all right, we're getting in a groove now. But does the light shine a little bit too bright on them because they haven't been in these situations yet? So if Jersey gets up, 3 games to 2, can they put them away? And the further in round 1, there's so many series going on. There's not as much focus on you. And then as this starts getting like dwindling down, down to 8 teams and 4, and you have those opportunities to put the other team away. Yeah. Can you do it? Because then you start gripping the sticks a little bit tighter in those areas. So I want to see New Jersey do that. They're going to be a good team for years to come. And this won't be a discussion that I'm having even starting next year. Like, they're getting all of that in right now. And if they don't end up going further than this, that's still a good season. And then watch out for them next year, because now they have a year under their belt in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And all that. You can't use that as not saying they would use that as an excuse anyway, but that's kind of where I stand with Jersey.
Yeah, it's interesting, like you said, to see as they progress, if they do, how they're going to react to certain situations. And I kind of look at it this way, and obviously I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but if Toronto does move on past Florida, like I said, lost game 1 to Florida, and if Jersey were to move on past Carolina, my question is more so with this Jersey team is, can they win on the road in front of that ridiculous crowd up in Toronto.
Yeah.
That's the kind of environment I look at, no disrespect to any other franchise or fan base, but playing on the road in a playoff game in Toronto is a lot different than playing on the road in Carolina. And I know the argument could be made, well, they just played in Madison Square Garden.
That's exactly what I was just going to ask you.
That's an environment they're used to. That's their rivals.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas, they're not going up to Toronto that often. And, the games don't mean as much during the regular season when they're playing the Maple Leafs as opposed to their cross the river rivals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, that we'll have to wait and see for that. Yeah, and that's a good point. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you got to put a team away, and let's just say it's Jersey and Toronto, and you need to close them out, and you have the potential to do that, but in Toronto, I mean, that's difficult for anybody. But can this Jersey team do it? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. All right, let's kind of discuss the series that we have right now and where we think that they will go. We're all standing right now. Everything is 1-0. Thursday, you have the Panthers and the Maple Leafs playing the second game, and then the Kraken and the Stars. We'll start there. What do you think? Not these specific games, but these series as a whole. Where do you think we're heading?
I really like the Toronto-Florida series. It's two very good teams, two very good stories, kind of polar opposites in terms of, I feel like, where they're at. You have one team that's, I feel like Toronto, they're still kind of trying to figure out like this whole playoff thing. Usually they're this time of year. I have to get my shots in, Chris. I have to get my shots in. This time of year, they're looking at tee times, but now they're looking at, how to get ready for playoff games. And then on the other side of that, you have a still, I think, very coming of age story down in Sunset. Mm-hmm. I don't think any of us realized or really thought that this Florida Panther team was going to be here, let alone in the playoffs at this point in time. So, and they've played spectacular. I really thought they were going to get swept by Boston, as it was probably everybody. So, quite honestly, and maybe I'm being biased because these are two division rivals, I'm looking at this series because this is going to be really exciting. And it seems as though the storyline, Chris, I want to get your thoughts on this. It seems as though very early on right now, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs versus Matthew Tkachuk. And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, he's been fantastic.
He really has.
And it's so like he's so polarizing just for like the way he plays and kind of like these cheap shots that he throws. He gets under your skin. He gets under your skin as a player. He gets under your skin as a fan. And you just watch like some of these things that he does. But he's one of those guys where it's like you don't need to do that because you're so good.
Yeah.
Don't like dumb yourself down with these cheap shots. And I just don't. Like
it's almost like Brad Marchand 2.0.
Yeah, it really and again, like Marchand is maybe the most hated player from fan bases, and even the Athletic. I always look forward to these. The Athletic always does these polls like within the league, like players, and it's anonymous, so you don't know who it is. And last year they asked the question, who's the most like disliked player in the league, and Marchand won that by he had like 68% of the vote. like it wasn't even close. But you might start leveling off a little bit between him and Tkachuk.
Yeah.
And on the other end of it, like the way he's playing, you can't deny that he's on a roll right now.
Yeah.
And that team as a whole is they have so much confidence. How can you not when you just beat Boston? And the way that you finished the season, you came into the playoffs kind of rolling.
Yeah. And
don't discount that. Do not discount that. So could this series go 7 games? Absolutely. Absolutely. And could it not go 7 and Florida take care of business before 7? Absolutely. Like I am high on Florida right now for the simple fact that the confidence in them is sky high. They have no business being on the ice with Toronto. None.
Yeah, I mean, in game 1, they really look like they've been there before. It was really impressive. And to echo your point about Tkachuk, I mean, when he's not playing against your team, he's really exciting to watch.
Yeah. Right. So we'll see where that goes. Kraken and the Stars, very entertaining first game, a lot of back and forth. What was the final? 5-4, right? Yeah, in overtime. The Kraken win that one in overtime.
Game overtime, a game-winning goal by former Lightning player Yanni Gord.
So Kraken just keep
on Kraken
proving people wrong. So you think the Dallas Stars salvage a home game?
I would have to imagine. I mean, if that game one was any indication of what kind of series this is going to be, I cannot wait. I mean, we didn't even mention, I'm surprised you didn't mention Joe Pavelski scoring 4 goals in a playoff game. After I mistake me if I'm wrong, did he miss the whole first series?
It was his first game back since, well, he didn't miss. He got hurt in that first series, but I think it was the first game that he got hurt in.
Yeah.
That nasty check, but from Dumba, but that kept him out the entire series. This was his first game back and he gets 4 goals. Crazy.
And then, ironically enough, the next night Draisaitl drops 4 too.
Yes.
So, which is insane. But
and they both lost, right?
Yeah.
So the moral of the story is don't score 4 goals by yourself. Apparently, I'll save the Devils and the Hurricanes for last. Oilers and Golden Knights. I think this is another one that is a coin flip. I think this one could go 7 games. Would not surprise me if you get a game 7 overtime. With this one, this one is totally up in the air for me.
Now, let me ask you, Chris, with Vegas, can they keep up with Edmonton? I feel like just with Edmonton and last year, what we saw from them, and we're just I feel like we're seeing, and you could believe it, I can't believe it even saying it. Like, I feel like we're seeing another level to Draisaitl and McDavid, and I just feel like I don't know how you stop that, especially when they're on the power play.
You don't.
Like, how does Vegas stop that?
They can't.
In theory.
Throw illegal hits. It's really, you can't. And that's, so what do you need to do is your depth. Like your depth needs to be Edmonton's depth, and that's where they're a little bit vulnerable. So you just gotta, the old Michael Jordan phrase, you can't stop him, you can only hope to contain him.
Yeah.
Don't let Draisaitl go off for 4 goals. And I say that and they lose the game, but you can't have, like, that's not sustainable, right? You can't allow him to do that game in and game out and expect to win all of them. You have to try to slow them down, minimize what they do and how they can dictate the game as best as possible. And then you win some battles because you have a good top 6 too in Vegas.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're no chumps. But your depth guys, when those lines are on the edge, you have to dominate those and then get some miraculous goaltending. Yeah, I know that's a tall order in this series, but you have to. So it's possible. It's definitely possible, but no. Draisaitl and McDavid, especially Draisaitl, has really cranked it up in this postseason. It's been crazy.
So you're saying it's kind of like a pick your poison, only contain one, and live and die by just possibly getting Draisaitl or McDavid. At least try to hold them to a point a night.
But the tough, like they put them on separate lines a lot, so it's not like your top 6 are dealing with one of them for whatever shift. And then you have them both on the power play, and it's like, forget about it. That's what makes them so dangerous, because they can just go off.
And I also look at Vegas, though, in this series. You talked about their depth, but I'm really looking at Jack Eichel. This is what you traded for.
Exactly. Yeah.
He has to go off. Like, he has, obviously, I'm not saying he has to meet McDavid at that level. He's a very talented player, but he's not Connor McDavid. I think we can say that safely without any debate. But this is where the reason they traded for. He has to come in and he has to have his moments where he could take over, because he can.
Yep.
And he has the players around him. I mean, and they also went out and got Ivan Barbashev, who, unfortunately I would have liked to have seen him in Tampa, but this is also the reason you got him. He could do, he's your 5-tool player. And he's playing on the first line with your superstar.
Yeah.
Go out there, let him throw the big hits around, set him up for scoring chances. And because, you do have a lot of weapons up in your top 6. And I feel like if they lose this series, it's not going to be because of goaltending. It's not going to be because of McDavid and Draisaitl are going off every night. It's going to be because your top 6 didn't come to perform.
Yeah, I agree. We'll see how that goes. And then finally, the Devils and the Hurricanes. Hurricanes lead that 1-0 after a 5-1 win. Very good friend of mine lives in North Carolina and is obviously a Hurricanes fan. And we text all the time. And before the season or the series started, I told him, I'm like, I just feel like you guys are going to be in control of this one. I was saying earlier how with New Jersey and just not having a lot to go off of in the past, and Carolina having that. Carolina's seasoned when it comes to the playoffs, and they're on a mission. Like I feel like they're kind of like this forgotten team, in the East, and they shouldn't be because they've been there for a handful of years now. And I told them, I'm like, I think you're going to handle the Devils pretty well, and then they go out and beat them 5-1. I mean, the Devils are a good team. They are a good team, and they showed it against the Rangers. But I just feel like Carolina is a step up for them, and to get past them is going to be kind of a Herculean effort, if you ask me. I think Carolina wins this thing in like 5 or 6.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. And for those in the comments that will surely show up later on, it's not because we're both native New Yorkers. It's because if you look at Carolina, if you want to follow on going Daily Faceoff, I'm looking at their lines and I don't see any holes. Like maybe that fourth line could be a little suspect, but at the same time, I mean, really, how does New Jersey match that on a shift for shift basis?
I don't know.
I mean, let's face it, Jack Hughes, phenomenal player.
Yeah,
really was the thorn in the Rangers' side in the first round. But can you see him having the same performance against Jacob Slavin, one of the most underrated defensemen in the league? No.
Yeah.
I see him going out there and it really being a matchup problem. And really I see Carolina, what they do so well and what they'll probably do very well in this series is that I feel like they wear you down over time, and then that's when they hit you.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Like they are a tough team, shift after shift after shift.
Yeah.
And defensively they're good. Goaltending they're fine. And I think that's where the Devils are relying on a rookie goalie. I just think that's not something you want to continue to do in the play. He's playing great.
I mean,
but at what point does that dam break? Like that's a massive risk.
Yeah, I don't see a replication of Jordan Bennington 2019. I just don't see it.
It's not. Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough ask, and he's obviously looked good, but to continue that, man, like that's a lot of weight to put on a goaltender like him. So, they got a good one for the future. Definitely, he's playing ride it for as long as you can in the playoffs. Yeah. But you got to get it. If it's not going well, you got to make that change. They already did that. They made the change to him in the Rangers series. Now they got to be smart enough. If it's not if in game 2 it goes the same way as game 1, and they've obviously shown that they will make that change. But man, that's a tall ask for someone in his position. So,
well, that's good that you brought it up real quick. I mean, how short is his leash in a series like this? You're already down 1-0.
How many? What did he give up? He gave up 3 goals before they pulled him.
Yeah, he had 2 shutouts in the previous series too.
3 goals on 8 shots? No, 11 shots. Sorry. So they pulled him out. You can't let it go too far. This is the playoffs. If it happened, this is what they did with the Rangers. So 2 games. If you get a repeat of that, you're at least pulled for that game and then reassess. Maybe you have a little bit better luck at home.
Yeah.
So we'll see. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, making it your first listen of the day. And it's going to wrap it up for the Thursday episode of Locked On NHL. If you're watching on YouTube, there's those favorites to win the Stanley Cup from FanDuel one more time. And for Mr. Adam Denker from Locked On Lightning, I am Chris Maselli from Locked On Avalanche. Enjoy the games, and we'll see you next week.